Okay, so we are with the verbal section now. So attempting the first question. So it says, let me just drag this. Yeah. No. So several recent articles have discussed non-verbal communication as an element of persuasion. Okay. Body language and eye contact are even more influential than words in persuading someone to adopt a certain point of view. Okay. So non-verbal communication as a means of persuasion, body language and eye contact. Thus, my recommendation is that you hire someone to train your sales team in using non-verbal communication skills. This will ensure that being able to persuade more customers to purchase our products. Which of the following most clearly points to a flaw? Okay, so if the sales team makes excessive use of non-verbal, this could lead to stagnation of sales. Okay, so the flaw is about increasing sales recommendation. Okay, next, the cost of hiring someone to teach non-verbal will be offset by the increased revenue from higher sales. Okay. The products sold are not objectively better than the products against which they compete. The sales team's non-verbal skills are not optimal at present, so obviously then there is scope of improvement, right? The company's sales force does not make most of its sales calls in person. So the only reason why this would fail, the flaw would be if the cost of hiring someone is offset by the increased revenue. So then this entire exercise of no use. So I think it should be the second option. Let's going to mark that. Yeah. Okay. Next. The Chaverton Post Gazette reported that the overall volume of retail sales was lower last year than the year before. Okay, so that means okay. Uh, Based that conclusion on a survey of all retail stores that were in business throughout both the years, these stores taken together had a smaller sales volume last year than the year before. Which one cast the most serious doubt? Okay, last year several new stores opened offering high quality merchandise. Yes, because this gazette had taken a conclusion on the basis of retail stores that were in business both the years. So if in the uh, you're basically trying to say that in those common stores the sales have reduced, but then if there were other stores where the sales was very high, and in that case this would be flawed, right? Overall volume of sales was lower, so should be this. Let's look at the other options. Many residents do most of their shopping at stores in other towns. Okay. Most of the stores that the survey advertise regularly. Separate survey of manufacturing business shows that it's better volume. And the year before last was the year of record sales, with most stores reporting their highest sales volume ever. Okay. All right. So it's still A. Next. Okay, so it says intense competition for grants and donations has prompted some non-profit organizations to help support their missions by generating revenues. Okay, competition for grants has prompted non-profits to help support their missions by generating revenues. These groups are led by people who have never launched a competitive venture. One way for non-profit to learn from the for-profit is to enter business plan competitions with sponsors, provide free business consulting to entrants, and offer awards. The process of developing the plans helps and foresee conflicts with their core mission. CPO Productions, the 2001 winner of Brazil's Social Entrepreneur Award, was created in 1999 by this journalist. The organization offers impoverished young people training in media skills and video. Recognizing the CPO's video and computer equipment was in use only part-time. Believe she could exploit the idle capacity by producing educational brochures, magazine, websites. Shippo could generate income to supplement donations. It would also give its graduates an opportunity to continue their professional development, realizing that uh, general Accomplishing these objectives required a viable business plan, submitted a general description of a business idea and its objectives to the competition, and was one of 80 applicants accepted in 2001. Okay. Based on the passage, which of the following can be most recently inferred about the contestants in business plan competitions? Most of them are companies devoted to providing educational service, not necessary. They have the opportunity to benefit from a competition even if they do not win it. Yes. See, it's saying here the process of developing the plan helps participants understand economic realities and foresee conflicts, right? In the first paragraph, last line. So even if they don't win it, they understand a lot of stuff from there, right? Most of them seek to revise their core mission. No, they intend on changing. No, view competitions where they attract potential donors. No. So next. The passage states that the process of developing a business plan has helps to do which of the following: foresee conflicts, identify potential donors, differentiate themselves, identify ideal capacities, maintain relationships with business consultants. Okay. So one way for non-profit organizations to learn from the for-profit is to enter business plan whose sponsors provide free business consulting to entrants and offer awards on the basis of this business plan. So maintain relationships with business consultants, not necessarily though. Identify potential donors within the for-profit business sector. Foresee conflicts with the core mission, differentiate themselves from identify ideal capacities within their companies. Okay. Yeah, that could be a reason. Helps the participants. Could also be identify potential donors, but here the donors are not for profits, right? The donors are universities and all. Yeah, let's go ahead with that. The passage most strongly supports which of the following statements? Okay. Prior to winning the business plan, CPO Productions was failing to achieve its non-profit core mission. No, that's not true. Anna Penido is basically, yeah, that's the person. Believe that CPO's competitive venture will be compatible with CPO Productions non-profit. Yeah, obviously. After the business plans, retain the service of the consultants, not mentioned, primarily based on evaluation of the expected magnitude of the profits, the contestants plan activities. So that's not mentioned. CPO plan to have its graduate provide unpaid. Okay, that's not mentioned. Okay, next. Real estate agent. Okay. Okay, so we have used up 10 minutes. That's fine. Real estate agents, some websites offer automatic appraisals of the market value of almost any home based on the recent selling prices of other homes nearby. Okay. But a real estate agent familiar with a home and its neighborhood can access the home's true market value far more accurately than any automated website can. Unlike the websites, a real agent can take into account the home's tangible aesthetic factors like views and design. Which one of these would strengthen the argument? Who take into account intangible uh, uh, aesthetic factors, assess homes, market values far more accurately? Okay. Most real estate agents take into account at least some factors by considering the home's own sales history, automatically account for many intangible factors. Okay, so then it would actually weaken. It is in a home seller's financial interest to have real estate agent assess the home market as accurately. Not known really. The recent sales prices of other homes reflect as a whole. So that would actually weaken again. Yeah, so yeah, so one is correct. Next, we are talking of accuracy there, I guess. Motor scooter dealers attribute a drastic decline in sales to a new law requiring scooter riders to wear helmets. Helmets had been obligatory for motorcycle riders, but not for motor scooter riders. All right. A difference that the dealers argue made scooters preferable. Safety advocates, however, dispute the dealer's explanation, pointing out the law's introduction coincided with a large increase in the cost of mandatory insurance of both types of vehicles. In evaluating the explanations, which is most helpful to know whether there were any scooter motor riders who regularly wear helmets before, all right, whether the cost of insurance for other motor vehicles has increased at the same rate, all right, how the accident rate for okay compare with this, okay, not really, how sales of scooters have changed, imported scooters, okay, sales of motorcycles that are close in purchase price to motorcycle have changed, that scooters sales have declined, yes. So if we see that motorcycle prices have also reduced, then it could be because of the insurance. All right, next. The human eye makes tiny, rapid, almost constant motions called microseconds. Okay, whatever. Investigators have long been unsure of what function they serve. Some even have gone as they could impair vision by blurring it, but it's actually likely that they enable perception of stationary objects. Visual systems have evolved to most readily detect moving objects because motion may indicate a predator is approaching, prey is escaping. So visual neurons respond to motion with unchanging objects less often pose a threat. So visual neurons do not respond as strongly. Some animals, frogs, are completely unable to see stationary objects but can easily see objects in motion. The reason humans see stationary objects better because human eyes create their own motion, prompting visual neurons to keep firing. Okay. Supporting this, researchers asked the subjects to stare fixedly at a dot in the center of a camera while reporting changes in their perception of other peripheral dot. While staring at the central dot, they reported the peripheral dot fading from view, becomes sparser and slower just before the peripheral dot seemed to vanish, then return to normal immediately before it reappeared. Okay. Frogs have which of the following? Eyes that do not make this. Yes. But then this is also possible. Visual neurons that fire only when a predator is approaching or prey is escaping. Visual neurons that do not fire unless prompted. No. All right. So we don't really know whether they make or not. They might make very little of it. But visual neurons that fire only when, all right, completely unable to see stationary objects. All right, let's just stick to this one. Next. The main purpose is to discuss experimental data on the correlation of explain how neurons generate, not really. Describe the evolution. No. They argue that this likely play a role in the perception of stationary objects? Yes. Compared to competing theories? Not really. Experiment drilled on the correlation of this with peripheral vision perception. Not really. Okay, let's go with the fourth one. All right, we have 14 questions left. Okay, the human eye. Okay, same question. In the first paragraph, okay, so the primary reason the passage mentions the idea that could impair vision is to raise an objection of a theoretical support. Illustrate have not been in agreement as to what the function is. Yes. Clarify a thesis that later statements in the passage are intended to refute. All right, so it could be this or this. All right, let's just stick to that because it's clearly saying they've been unsure of what. All right, next, let's go on. In a 10-year study, one group of volunteers was given a medical screening of disease X every year, but similar group of the same size was only screened for disease X at the end of the study. 9% of the first group were diagnosed with X during the study and received treatment, but only 6% were diagnosed with X when they received the screening at the end of the study. Diseases must have disappeared without medical treatment in some individuals in the second group. In order to determine, evaluate the strength of the reasoning, you need to know what. There were statistically significant lifestyle differences between the individuals. Okay. Yes. How many people volunteered? How long it takes to be treated for disease X? Whether volunteers were told what disease, how frequently on average medical screening used in the study produces erroneous diagnosis of disease X. No, I guess that should be it. Historians create ideas we call history, which are derived from an order existing in the real world of fact. Okay. Since the patterns discovered in the real in that world depend in part on the aims of the investigator, historical periods will tend to be defined in incompatible ways by historians with different interests. Thus, insofar as the aims of historians of music, painting, literature, and poetry are different, it cannot be assumed that real world facts about art will ever be accurately represented. The accounts will ever be anything but arbitrary, not really arbitrary. The periods of artistic style delineated by the historians will coincide. Historical patterns will differ appreciably. There are any facts from which patterns may be derived. So it cannot be assumed that real world real world facts about art will ever be accurately represented. And the patterns defined by these historians will differ. Yes, I think that would be the fourth one. Next, research added towards recovering ancient DNA began in 1984 when pieces of DNA were extracted from museum specimens of an animal extinct for about a century. Okay. Most such genetic material recovered from biological consists of tiny fragments rather than the strings of thousands of molecules typically found, but these fragments may contain sufficient info to identify species through comparison with modern DNA from descendant species. However, the need to verify whether particular fragments actually come from ancient organisms or whether they came from modern contaminants, such as the sweat of people who have handled the specimens, is crucial. For example, claim to have extracted DNA fragments of 17 million year magnolia leaves found in an unusual fossil deposit. But in as a modern contaminant, they argue that even under most favorable conditions, the rate of degradation of DNA is such that useful genetic material could not be recovered from fossils that old, and that since the leaves were trapped in wet deposits, it is particularly unlikely that any DNA would have survived. A solution to this debate lies in the fact that any ancient DNA should differ from that of related modern species. The DNA extracted in the fossils are actually from the information contained in the DNA. The passage suggests that the scientists mentioned in the first highlighted portion of the text differed from the scientists in the second highlighted portion of the text, in that the former assume a higher rate of degradation, argue that the conditions were exceptional, have different techniques for extracting genomes that were 17 minutes old, have devised a method for identifying, okay, have believed that fragments could survive in fossils for 17 million years. Yep. The passage is concerned with questioning the applicability of a particular method, identifying issues central to correctly dating DNA fragments, presenting evidence to undermine a theory. Okay, so it's basically us talking about extracting old DNA from fossils or biological relics and comparing it with modern DNA. Questioning the applicability, identifying issues central to correctly dating DNA fragments. Okay, possible. Presenting evidence to undermine theory about the age of certain. No. Describing two methods to date. No, not really. Presenting several possible explanations for the survival of DNA. No, not really. So it's the second option. So the following would clearly undermine the usefulness of the author's solution to the scientist debate that is discussed in the passage. A solution to the debate that ancient DNA should differ from that of related species. It would be apparent. Okay, DNA extracted from ancient species is not identical to the DNA of related species. So that's actually supporting. Most ancient biological relics are not preserved under favorable conditions. Okay. Only tiny fragments can be recovered from ancient relics. There are many segments of DNA that show very little change between ancient and modern. Yes, okay. Next. Teacher, among 30 nations with comparable levels of economic development, Nation X ranks 28th in the proportion of college students who get a degree in science. Okay, so Nation X ranks 28th in the proportion of college students who get a degree in science. Okay, undoubtedly, the reason is that most of the nation's secondary school teachers do not have a science degree. Okay, okay, fine. Among 30 nations, it's ranking very low. The reason is secondary school teachers do not have a science degree. Okay, an inspired and knowledgeable science teacher can excite students about science, thus encouraging them to get a degree. So the following accurately restates the conclusion. Nation X has a lower population who get a degree than do most nations with comparable levels of economic development. No, conclusion is not that. That's the fact. Most secondary teachers in X lack science degrees and have trouble exciting students about science. Yes. Inspired and knowledgeable secondary school teachers can encourage the students to get a degree in science. That's not really the conclusion, kind of. Okay. The reason that only a relatively low or get a degree in science is that secondary school science teachers there lack science degrees. The reason is not there still. Okay, if more secondary school students became excited, more of them would eventually go on to become science teachers. That's not really what they're saying. Okay, most teachers in X lack science degrees and have trouble exciting students about science. That should be the more accurate statement. Next, according to a recent large-scale survey of people who had purchased new home exercise equipment during the past 5 years, 10% of motorized treadmills purchased during that period had required repairs more than once. Okay. According to a recent large-scale survey of people who had purchased new home exercise equipment during the past 5 years, 10% of treadmills purchased and required repairs more than once. Only 2% of non-motorized treadmills needed repair. Therefore, people who want to buy treadmill for regular workouts can rely on having their routine disrupted far less often if they buy a non. Which of the following is an assumption? Non-motorized treadmills provide at least as good a workout for people who use them regularly as motorized. Okay. At least as many people in the survey had purchased motorized treadmills as had purchased non-motorized treadmills. Not really. Motorized treadmills do not generally take longer to repair. Okay. So it says that rely on having the routine disrupted less often if they buy non-motorized. So if motorized treadmills do not take long to repair, then it would not be disrupted, right? So that is not the assumption. Motorized treadmills take long to repair than non-motorized treadmills. But anyways, people who bought treadmills that are not far more likely to use them regularly if they're motorized than if they are non-motorized. People who purchase new treadmills are not far more likely than people who purchase old treadmills to have purchased motorized treadmills. Okay. All right, let's look at this one again. We have some 17 minutes. We have 6 questions, so that's fine. According to recent scale survey, people who purchased new equipment during the past 5 years, those who purchased motorized treadmills, 10% of them needed service, repairs more than once, while 2% of them ever needed repair. Okay. So we are assuming what? That okay, non-motorized treadmills provide at least as good a workout for those people who use them regularly as motorized treadmills do. So if that is true, then this makes sense. But if non-motorized treadmills were not very helpful and they did not provide a good exercise or some regular workout, a good workout, then even if motorized vehicles broke down, maybe you could prefer those, right? Let's check the others. At least as many people in the survey had purchased, so that's not right. Motorized treadmills do not take longer to repair. So motorized vehicles are repaired very fast, so they do not disrupt the practice, right? But then they're saying that the argument is based on an assumption. The argument is that they get disrupted more, those who are using motorized. So that's not right. People who have bought treadmills that are not far more likely to use them regularly. Okay. But that is not the point of this. People who purchase new treadmills within the past year versus 5 years ago. That's not. So let's go with one. Next. According to Susan's order to care, the most salient fact about the occupation of nursing has been its traditional concept by both the public and medical professionals as women's work. The most salient fact about the occupation of nursing has been its traditional conceptualization by both the public and medical professionals As women's work, a judgment that has dramatic impact on both the nature of the task must perform the status of the profession. How is ideology of nursing not out of belief in women's rights, understandings before 1870 nursing took place either in the home where women nursed their loved ones or in hospitals which were custodial institutions for the poor. Despite the differences in the settings, women in each of these roles assumed to be naturals, so were paid wages whose meagerness suggested money's irrelevance to the true character of nursing. Even after 1870, when scientific and medical advances hastened the development of nursing, the ideology considered changed very little. True leaders in nursing education advocated being a woman was necessary, not sufficient. They envisioned the establishment of strict training schools controlled by women to teach elements of healthcare that were no longer attended by the rapidly specializing physician. So they envisioned the establishment of strict training schools controlled by women to teach elements of healthcare that were no longer attended by the rapidly specializing physician. Okay. They were pleased to be aided in their efforts by hospital doctors who understood that the movement to upgrade and standardize would support their own plans for reforming medicine. Okay. Upgrade and standardize nursing education could support their plans for reforming medicine. But the goals of the three groups were radically divergent. Hospital administrators realized that training schools as their own institutions would become sources of cheap labor. Doctors saw nursing education as a way of improving care in the hospital, but they opposed any move to bolster nurses' control of their own labor or to improve their scientific skills. Okay. As hospital exigencies quickly came to dominate decision making in the training schools, nursing educators lost control over admission standards, the quality of education, and the labor of students on the wards. Okay. The information in the passage suggests that would be most likely to disagree with which of the following statements about education. All right. So, nursing education in the 19th century dramatically changed the ideology of nursing. No, nursing education did not significantly affect the professional relationship between hospitals and limited the autonomy of nurses in relation to doctors. Hospital administrators hoped that standardization nursing education would promote their own goals. Prior to 1870, there was no formal education because women are assumed to be naturally capable. Yes, okay. Disagree dramatically changed the ideology of nursing. It's the word naturals is primarily in order to suggest view of appropriateness of women for the occupation, point to the irreverence, irrelevance of women's rights. No, explain the interests of 18th century women in pursuing. No, differentiate the role of women as nurses in the home from. No, emphasize the importance of nursing or 18th and 19th century notions of womanly character. Emphasize the importance for nursing ideology of womanly character and duty. Okay. All right. Which of the following best states the central idea? Okay. The ideology of nursing as a profession has been informed by a commitment to human rights. To women rights. Okay. Not really. Conflicts between leaders in nursing education and hospital prevented the professionalization of nursing. All right. Traditional ideas about women's work hindered the evolution of the ideology of nursing. Yes. Doctors did not recognize nurses as professionals because the nursing school curriculum was too general. Scientific and medical advances of the late 19th century had little effect on the practice of nursing. No, I think traditional ideas about women's work hindered the evolution of the ideology of nursing. I guess that is what they are trying to say. Ideology of nursing has determined the settings in which nursing occurs, 20th century notions, the status of nursing profession, the goals, the role of women in different branches of medicine. No, has determined the status of the nursing profession. I mean, has been determined by the notions of female character and duty, but it has determined what? The status of the nursing profession. Both the nature of tasks and the status of the profession. The settings, the goals, the role of women. No. So the third option, next. The consulting firm compiles a yearly ranking of the world's leading companies according to the amount of money each spent on research. Shown that the spending more on research has no correlation with better financial performance. So this year's study found that multinational companies that took a global approach to research financially outperformed those concentrated their spending on research in their home market. Which of the following statements is most strongly supported? Taking a global approach to research has become necessary in order to achieve business financial success. Okay. Maybe companies seeking to improve their financial performance can usually do so by increasing, not necessarily, only the largest countries are able to provide sufficient research innovation to ensure leading companies' profitability. All right, we're not talking of countries as such. A company with a low ranking in research spending may have better financial performance. I know that's what it's trying to say that it's not. Um, the company currently spending the most on research is not likely to be among the best. No. So it says taking a global approach to research has become necessary. So that should be it. Next one. Okay, the last one. In a certain country, the government maintains agricultural counseling offices to dispense free advice. Okay. Critics contend these offices should close since they're a waste of public money. Office staff countered that the value to farmers of the advice greatly exceeds the cost. The critics' response is that it precisely services generating such extra value. It is precisely services generating such extra value that can and therefore should be rendered by private enterprise for profit. In their response, the critics of the counseling use which of the following argumentative techniques? Show evidence, not evidence, arguing that the opposite side, in gathering evidence, systematically neglected potential counter evidence. All right, attempting to show that the opposing side had confused the notion of revenue with that of profit. The something that is true of a larger group is not necessarily also true for every subgroup. That the evidence used by the opposite side is purely self-serving and in need of independent corroboration. Critics think that these offices should close. They are a waste of money. They counter that this is of great value and it's beneficial, exceeds the cost of maintaining the office. The critics say that services generating such extra value that can and therefore should be rendered by private enterprise for profit. So there should be it should not be for free. Okay, it should not be for free. So I'm going to show that the opposing side has confused the notion of revenue with that of profit, arguing that the opposing side, in gathering evidence, systematically neglected counter evidence. Okay, it's not talking of evidence as such. Something that is true of a larger group is not necessarily also true for every subgroup of the larger group. Mhm. Evidence that it is leading to value, counter evidence. It's not counter evidence. Exactly, yeah. So it should be one. Evidence used by the opposition to support its position actually undermines. Yes. So because it is giving you profit, so it should not be for free. That's what the idea is. So it should be option one. All right. So we are done with this section. We'll be back with the next one. Meanwhile, we'll take a break.